Hey guys, so I'm here to talk about The Devil in the White City by Eric Larson. Just a little about the author. Eric Larson is a very disingenuous gentleman. He likes to write about things that he likes to write about, regardless of, his audience, regardless of people, his feedback basically. He was born in Brooklyn, New York. He had a very typical boyish, adventurous childhood, which led up to how his fascination about writing mysteries. He originally wanted to be a New York cartoonist. He would submit his drawings daily. He wouldn't really get feedback on it. In high school, he had a girlfriend that helped him get into Penn State, and they eventually did not make it, but he ended up getting a job as a editorial in New York, which was from getting into Penn State. He wrote many articles, many columns, and he didn't really enjoy it that much after. He started to get bored. He met someone, and which kind of led him on to bigger things. He eventually moved to Baltimore, and he wrote his first novel, The Naked Consumer. He really liked his book, and he was very proud of it, but no one really liked it. I mean, it was his first thing, so a little bit about the background of this book. There was actually a lot of research going into this book. He became inspired when he started reading on H.H. Holmes, which is actually a notorious killer, famous for his many killings of luring women into his hotel that he has designed specifically for killing. And he kind of incorporated the World's Fair of 1893, which was known as the World's Columbian Exposition. He incorporated the two in kind of like a switching back forth storyline, and he automatically fell in love with the whole idea of narrative historical nonfiction. He wanted to write more, and this was actually originally a research for his previous book, Isaac Storm, but he was just so in love with it that he decided to write The Devil in the White City. He finally published it in 2003, after many months of research and first drafts and finalizing everything. What grabbed our attention when picking this book was that the idea of a serial killer being the main character. We thought it would be interesting to understand the whole paradox and how a serial killer's mind works and what revolves around it to drive them to kill so sporadically without any guilt or remorse or anything. And we found ourselves fascinated with this topic because it seems too unreal for a person to have that much capability of doing something so horrifying as that and not feeling anything, which it's pretty interesting to read about in a book. Only one struggle we kind of found throughout this book was, since the storylines do switch back and forth from the point of view from two architects building the World's Columbian Exposition or the World's Fair, and Holmes, was that sometimes the chapters wouldn't really label themselves, so you kind of had to figure out which it was talking about. But once you read more into it, it would kind of make sense. It made a lot of connection to American Horror Story. In the 5th season, which is called Hotel, it is basically derived from H.H. Holmes' biography, and they use the same hotel, the similar luring of the women, the same plot, settings, and they objectify women in the whole season. So it's pretty much the same theme played out as in this book. In the first quarter of the story, it is the introduction of both storylines, and that's when it kind of gets confusing. It was hard to understand what relevance H.H. Holmes had to this, the whole architects and Burnham and Root building the whole the whole World's Fair and how that had to contribute with H.H. Holmes. But later in the book, you start to see how they're relevant as they're in the same time period, and they play a part in the whole Chicago atmosphere and how the city really took a turn for the worst as it progressed with Taurus. The story starts off in little pieces, so you kind of have to put them together. The prologue is very important, and when like first starting to read this book, it kind of gives you a little bit information on both things as a nonfiction story. Like, you have to know a little bit of background knowledge in order to understand how they're all going to be relevant together. But it does have a lot of foreshadowing in it. As it kind of gets to the end of a chapter, it would say, but this didn't work out for Bird, Hammer, and Root as they become to like progress in their works, which leads to how they're gonna progress, like what conflicts they're gonna have, what they would be approaching, and it kind of leaves you in a cliffhanger because you have to wait until the other chapter. You have to read past the whole chapter with H.H. Holmes to get to that part. So a little bit of mystery is incorporated into that. It definitely leaves you kind of on edge because you're so like, you want to know what happens. Like, an example of that would be, from the start there was tension between two firms, although no one could have known it would erupt later and cause attack by Sullivan on Burnham's greatest achievements. And that's on page 30 in the book. It says stuff like that it doesn't really go into much explanation or detail to kind of keep us like on the edge, kind of to get us wanting to know what's gonna happen. In the second part of the book, or the second quarter, it goes more in depth about Larson's writing and how he is very into detail, very into diction. All of his research played a huge role into when he was writing it. Nothing goes basically unnoticed. Like, everything is to facts, everything is stated. There's not that much opinion based. There's not really anything that he wrote for himself that wasn't true, that wasn't part of the history. He does add like some points of like sarcasm or like some like funny quotes, but like it's not to the point that it's mostly a fiction story. It's very much nonfiction. He uses a lot of imagery when talking about Holmes' killing sprees and about the women. His wording choice is a little bit more advanced, and sometimes it's kind of hard to understand, but with context clues he uses a lot of them, so it becomes very easy to pick up on what he's trying to put down. Even though this story is very serious, the killing's very serious topic, even though like his detailed explanations of the killings, there's not that many. It's kind of just inferred that he like killed the women. It just says how Holmes goes through so many of these women, like he like continues his like works. It doesn't really say he continues killing women. It doesn't really go into detail that much about how he did it. It kind of just gives you an image that you should like that you can picture in your head, and that's it. Like, from time to time, not very common. It kind of takes the seriousness off of the whole concept of this notorious serial killer. Something we would change about this story, though, is to add more attention grabbers to kind of give it that fire, that flame, that spark, to kind of keep the reader engaged throughout the whole novel. It was kind of hard to do that, to stay on topic, just because it takes quite of a while to bring the story together at the end. Maybe some romance, to go more in depth in Holmes' like marriages, and just kind of have more drama with that. But in general, it was a very good book if you like mystery, if you like horror, if you like thoughts of like magic and like stuff that should be fiction but is actually found in nonfiction. A lot of the things that they talk about is like the whole magic in the air of this city. Like, this city is a very real place, but you just kind of get that that vibe of just like it's so different from anywhere else. The way that it's worded, it kind of like it's always leaving you in suspense about something very, not very basic, but just something that would rather be, like, most of the time it would just be something boring. It says quotes like, or it says phrases like, young women drawn to Chicago by the fair and by the prospect of living on their own had disappeared. Last seen at the killer's block-long mansion, a parody of everything architects held dear. The phrases used kind of bring the two storylines together in a very interesting way. I would not recommend this book for people that get uncomfortable with, like, killing or, like, the thought of anything around that. Or if they just simply don't like nonfiction, this book's not really for you. I kind of learned a lot of things from this, like, how we were talking about the paradox of a serial killer. We learned how Holmes was actually a very loving person, was very smart with the way he gathered himself. He knew what he was doing. He was very smart. Most of them are very intelligent. They know how not to get caught, basically. And it brought a lot of knowledge on architecture. It brought knowledge on the World's Fair. It was definitely a very informative piece of work. And it kind of gave that mystery twist, which was really good to not get bored from. Is it worth the investment? Personally, I don't think it is, but I could see how someone would be interested in it if they like the old facts that tie with mystery in, like, old historic pieces. Like, if you like to learn about, like, how, like, witchcraft and, like, all that stuff, like, I can, like, and, like, the mystery behind things that seem magical and not real, but they definitely do have, like, a sort of realness to them. They definitely were in history. They were definitely talked about. This book is for you, and yeah, that's The Devil in the White City. Thanks for watching. Bye.